One of the things with both anxiety and ADHD is escape avoidance. And what it's saying, talking about the emotions, is I don't feel like doing it now. Later on, I will feel like doing it. Some of the basic approaches for dealing with it, living with it, and reducing it ultimately is exposure.
Welcome to the ADHD Social Playbook Podcast. I am your host, Caroline Maguire. Today on the podcast, I am chatting with renowned expert, Dr. Russ Ramsay. Dr. Ramsay is the founder and director of University of Pennsylvania's Adult ADHD Treatment Research Program. He is a professor of psychiatry. He is board certified in cognitive behavioral therapy. He has so many credentials, and he has been unfailingly supportive to me and my new book. And I sat down in this episode to have a conversation with him about anxiety. One of the topics that we really get deep into in this episode is about flooding and strategies we can use with anxiety. So let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Okay, Dr. Ramsay, you have written so much about anxiety, and I've read as much of it as a human being could read in the past couple of weeks. One of the big things that people talk about is that ADHD people, autistic people, have a higher sensitivity, and that sensitivity means that we flood more easily. And I'm just wondering, it feels true. Is it true?
Being a former academic, I'll give an essay answer to a yes/no question. No, because it is more complicated. At least within ADHD, and this is some of the work by Russ Barkley, there's a couple levels to emotion. One is the emotional impulsivity, and this is how for folks with ADHD, and I would imagine, at least coexisting with autism, it really shoots in there quick. It's like going in on ice because there's not the same maybe checks and balances or speed bumps along the way. So it comes on quick. And then there's the top down, forgive my puppet show here, but the top down regulation of, all right, once it comes on, how do we rein it in? And so both sides, it comes on quick and it's hard to rein in. So I would imagine that can give the experience of, I'm more sensitive than everybody else, and it hits me harder than it does everybody else. But that's really an empirical question. It may not be that it's any different, but it can feel that way just because it's able to knock you off balance quicker. So that's a very long-winded, academic, qualified, even if we, because who cares, if the food tastes too sour to me, who cares as well? Sour taste to you tastes the same as sour to me. But if I go, but this is too sour for me, that's what's most important.
It is. And I always say, when we talk about certain tools to help children, for instance, they always talk about well, you shouldn't be this flooded. It isn't that big a problem. And I always feel but that doesn't matter. If it feels that big to you, then it feels that big to you. And that's what we're dealing with. And we're trying to modulate, not, well, that's overblown. And I feel like people say that they flood more quickly. And it sounds like you have a really good reason why.
Right. And probably functionally, in terms of what happens next, it is that, in terms of, what somebody said to you, how you respond to somebody else. So, functionally, I'm not sitting across from somebody and saying, well, it's not exactly that, or what you're describing isn't exactly anxiety. It's more like fear. It's more like, let's get started. I know what you're talking about. Let's try to make things better.
Do you think that some of what's going on when people in the ADHD community, adults especially, talk about their anxiety levels being so high, do you think that there's a degree to which there's more social anxiety out there than is being diagnosed? Because people sometimes are really suffering, and I worry that people aren't getting the mental health help that they need.
Yes, there's more out there, and I think the social element among the anxieties for adults with ADHD, and probably kids too, but I specialize in adults, very often there is a social element to it. And, stepping back even for a moment. Anxiety is, I mean, it's usually it's pretty close with depression, usually in first place, second place, but usually anxiety comes out ahead and maybe is a precursor to then depression. But one of the core features of anxiety, yes, we think about it as the perception of risk or something might go wrong, but sort of enveloping that is the sense of intolerance of uncertainty. I don't know for sure. Does this person like me? They tweeted or they texted this. How did they mean that? And I've made the case that ADHD itself is an uncertainty generator. I know I can do it, but will I do it? And the other piece, the social piece, is so much of ADHD is public facing. You're the student in class who said, like one of my clients said, yeah, whenever I was called on by the teacher, my first reaction was, huh, what? And the giggles in the background. And reflexively, but it burns in there.
Oh,
and
yes.
And other things. Why can't you be more like your brother? Or, did you take the garbage out? The heavy sighs, the eye rolls, some of these things. Not everybody, and not everybody has the anxiety, but ADHD, the experience of living with ADHD and the snafus, the slip-ups, the executive functioning difficulties, I mean, it can be self-generated too. Why do I wait till the last minute all the time? It can generate these apprehensions, which can make the world small. Because why would I want to? I've likened it to the invisible fences with dogs. You get burned, you get shocked enough, you're gonna pull in and say, I don't want to get shocked anymore. So, again, another long-winded answer for, I think that's why and that can lead to the depression and the withdrawal. So. That's why those are number 1 and 2 in terms of coexisting features in adult ADHD.
I don't think it was long-winded at all. I think it was a great explanation. And as somebody who was bullied as a kid, I don't remember at the time when I sort of girded myself up, became really uncomfortable, and started to be more social. I was luckily like 12, 13. So I have only distant memories of that. But, I'm asking adults, and I get beaten up on the internet a lot because people will say, why do you bring up this stuff? Why don't you let it go? And I'm like, I can't let connection go because lack of connection leads to loneliness, leads to mental health crisis, right?
Right.
But I think some of the reason that I get that is I'm asking them to do something really hard. And like you said, so anxiety provoking. So I think it's a great explanation because every time someone rolls their eyes at you and then you have to answer a question, it's kind of brave.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And there's, I work in cognitive behavioral therapy. You don't think yourself into having ADHD, but the mindset's, we can have thoughts, and others can too, thoughts and beliefs about our feelings. I should be over this by now. Boys don't cry. Whatever it may be, or I shouldn't be angry. Or I should be, a lot of should statements that really don't help. I'm not saying that we should spill our feelings all over. Feelings always change. That's one of the things, in reading a lot on anxiety for the anxiety workbook, read an account of an expert in panic attacks, panic disorder, who said, I've never seen a panic attack because by the time people get to my office, it's over. It always changes, but in the middle of it, it's a tornado. It's an emotional tornado. It's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. I was thinking of this because of the social anxiety piece. I am a big proponent, and I'll just speak for me, as an anxious person, that cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma therapy, all those things are life-changing. And one of the things I definitely am going to say in this chapter is, please go get help, because absolutely you can get things from the internet, you can get things from this book, but it's life-changing to me. And does cognitive behavioral therapy that you mentioned, and I know you're just one of the foremost experts, is that just for anxiety or just for social anxiety? Do you handle all levels of anxiety with that? I just think we should put it out there so people know.
Yes. I mean, even before I got pulled into the ADHD universe, I was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy for depression, all forms of anxiety, to a degree trauma. There's other people more expert that's their thing. And you know what? It is a wider umbrella of cognitive behavioral therapy, and especially with over the years, core CBT, it was always focused on emotions. It started as a treatment for depression. But as it grew and it expanded into its applications, there are cousins within the behavioral therapy family tree more explicitly covering some of it. And hopefully these things are overlapping a lot, but dialectical behavior therapy is one. And colleague and internet friend Scott Spradlin is currently working on a book on DBT for adult ADHD. Alexander Philipson in Germany has studied it. Also, acceptance and commitment therapy. We're all coming at it in a different way, and it's converging, but really looking at, how I frame it is changing the relationship with our emotions and understanding what they are, what signals they're giving. And a lot of times, I don't like calling them negative emotions like anger or anxiety, but they're unpleasant. But sometimes, there's healthy anxiety. There's an untethered, snarling dog down the road that you don't know, crossing the street or not going down that street. That feeling we get, that's right on par.
Right.
And hopefully we find out it's a lovely dog later on and it licks us when we come by. But we don't know that. That's the uncertainty. And, even sometimes, it's like one of the reframes I'll use with clients. Like, what information are your emotions giving you? And even sometimes if it's unpleasant, a twinge of guilt for something that's not our fault, that we go, okay, I really didn't do anything. The very fact that they came over and it snowed while they were here, that's not my fault. But I feel bad that they have to drive home in the snow. But even something like that, and this draws on some of the work of David Burns, wrote the book Feeling Good, is looking at, well, even the fact that you had that response, part of that means, hey, you're looking out for your friends, or you take responsibility for yourself. So even the unpleasant stuff can come from a good place, but that's a different way of viewing it. Oh, why am I always guilt-ridden? Now, that's different. A little twinge versus guilt-ridden, that's a different degree of magnitude, where the guilt-ridden part for things not your fault. And again, that can come, for somebody with ADHD, that can come from you're always late, you're never on time, and it's an overactive signal. And it's dose-dependent. For a little bit, I don't want to be late again. Let me make sure I leave now rather than trying to do one more thing. That's adaptive use of it in change, like sort of corralling the feeling. But, when it comes up and beats you up, almost like, you mentioned bullying, it's almost like sometimes our emotions bully ourselves.
Oh, I think that's so true, because we have so much rumination and we have so much I should. And all those negative messages, they live on and, keep on in our minds. And so that's why I think it's very hard for people not to have anxiety, right? Because there's this echo in your head giving you all of these negative comments that have been said to you. I'm hoping as people are more educated that our youngers won't have this, but we're different generations and we do, you brought up something that you once taught me, and you don't know if you remember you taught me this, but you taught me that people have coping mechanisms, and they have positive coping mechanisms and maladaptive coping mechanisms. And that was one of the biggest sort of things you ever taught me, because you taught me that maladaptive coping mechanism, we came up with it because we didn't have anything else. And one of the things I sort of notice in the ADHD adult community is that people had anxiety. They didn't get help because no one validated them, basically. And now they have ways of dealing with that anxiety. And a lot of them are not positive. And I just wondered, can you speak to that maladaptive, adaptive piece a little bit? Because I want to give people hope that they can shift this.
Oh, sure. And the stuff is sneaky. Like one example I've used to illustrate that, let's just say a college student, somebody with ADHD is going to college and they're having a typically tough time the first semester, everything, because everything's quicker. They don't have the infrastructure of like parents making sure they get the homework done, stuff like that. And they're feeling beaten down a little bit. And then, a friend of theirs in a sorority, fraternity, whatever, or elsewhere, is having a tough time. So they can feel good being a good friend. Something that, hey, this is immediate. I can act on it right now. I can support my friend. I'll worry about homework later, which, being a good friend, you feel good, they feel good. It's patently a good thing. However, the timing of it, if later on then you're not prepared for the assignment or the test, and then you don't do well and you go, I'm not a good student, I don't belong in college, well, that's a mismatch right there, because we don't know if you're a good student, or probably more specifically, we don't know if that's the right class for you or the right major. But what we do know is if you sacrifice studying to help out the friend, then you end up there. So that would be something that it's almost like self-medication. I'm going to do something I'm good at. But one of the things with both anxiety and ADHD is, well, at least specifically with ADHD, one of the most common behavioral responses is escape avoidance. Let me leave the situation, or I'll study later when I'm in the mood to do it. When are we in the mood to study or do taxes or things like that? Now, I get it, but it's, and what it's saying, talking about the emotions, is later on, I don't feel like doing it now. Later on, I will feel like doing it. But probably not, at least no more. So this is another thing, like dealing with anxiety, some of the basic approaches for dealing with it, living with it, and reducing it ultimately is exposure. Facing fears, which, a way to think about it, because that sounds ominous, and it's incremental, but a way to think about it is whatever you think the scariest movie you ever saw was. If you watch it 10, 15 times, it still might be a wonderful, scary movie, but it's not going to get you the same way.
No.
You know when the shark comes in Jaws. You know when Linda Blair's head turns around in The Exorcist, the scariest movie I ever saw, or other things. But it can't get you the same way. So in a way, what exposure does is bore you out of that feeling. Again, you might still have that theme, and the more you get up and talk in front of other people, the more you practice things, either the better you'll get and the less anxiety-provoking it'll come, or you can at least make an informed decision, because part of what emotions do, including, I won't say depression, but a degree of sadness, is sometimes going, well, I'm never going to be a lead singer in a group, so maybe I should do something else with my free time. Maybe I'll play a sport or play an instrument or something like that. Letting go of things, but at least after having given it a fair shot. And that's not avoidance. That's not giving up. That's like, no, I played this season. I did this for a while. I tried that major, but I really don't think it's for me. That can be an informed decision. Let go of things so we can move on to other things.
I'm really glad you brought up avoidance, because someone told me this and I was like, oh, this is so true. You mentioned all the reasons we avoid. The other thing that someone brought up to me that I don't know, I thought it sounded true, but you might tell me not at all, is that if you talk about fight, flight, and freeze, that on some level, some of us are stuck in a freeze pattern and it goes on longer. So we're not socializing, we're not engaging in things that are harder. It is part of that avoidance pattern, but they were saying it's also part of this freeze pattern. Is that true, or is that just made up?
You know what? I would say there's a lot of things that they fit a category, but maybe not at the extreme end. And some of the neuroplasticity studies were dealing with stroke victims, stroke survivors. And it involved, the neuroplasticity, some of those studies involved really methodical, spending an hour or two a day picking up utensils and placing them. It was really rigorous exercises. Now, there is neurodiversity. What we're doing now, the thinking that goes into it, the prep, all this stuff, it's a benefit for our brain. And we hear stuff, we learn stuff, it changes the brain. But within normal limits. So going back to the fight, flight, and freeze, these things are continua. So like the fight, flight, running away from the dog, but there are the lower level signaling without it being full blown. Because if the dog's running after us, we're having all the symptoms of a panic attack, but it's not a panic attack because it is rushing blood to the major muscle groups. The heart rate's up, everything's up. We're just ready. We have narrowing of vision because we don't want to say, oh, look at those pretty flowers as the dog gets our aorta or anything like that. Similar with the freeze. The freeze can be more frozen for some people going through it. Now, metaphorically, are some people saying, yeah, I'm about to do something, but I never get into it. I sit there for a minute and then I go do something else. That's probably at, I don't want to say milder end, but at one end of the continuum that might not be as prominent as somebody with PTSD who goes, yeah, I'm sort of not there for a few moments. I'm sitting there, but I'm, dissociating whatever. So that's a very long-winded, it does play a role. And, there's that, one of the executive functions is behavioral inhibition, being able to stop and pause. And that allows us to act with intention. Okay, usually if I do this, this doesn't end up, so maybe I'll try something different. Or, boy, I could eat this right now, or I can wait and have a proper dinner or do my workout first or something like that. Yeah, that'll be better for me. Work with a longer range interest. But there are other times that somebody freezes, and it could be for many other reasons, but a history of ADHD where you go, you know what, homework, I'll do it later. And it nudges things the other. So that would probably be like how I would describe, I'll say less symptomatic freeze, but if that pause leads you off track and later on it works against you. Now, people without ADHD can do that as well, but there might be something more to the emotional pause, for somebody with ADHD or freeze,
that makes
we'll call
sense
it.
to me. No, that makes sense to me.